Gloria Singer, and I'd like to welcome you to our virtual trip to Spain. Having personally traveled with Federation to Spain not long ago, I can attest that Federation missions are like none other, filled with new friends, exciting locations, and a chance to visit with Jewish communities around the world. We look forward to being able to travel together in the future, but in the meantime, I'd like to thank Gil Travel for the chance to travel this season in a new way. Being together today helps us stay connected to one another here in Boca Raton and with our Jewish community abroad. While unfortunately we are unable to travel the streets of Toledo due to Spain's recent lockdown restrictions, we are still looking forward to you joining us today as we learn about Spain and its Jewish history from our guide and scholar, Dr. Victoria Atlas, who I will introduce in a minute. Before we get started, there are a few housekeeping notes to go over. Your microphone will be muted throughout the program. If you have a question for our guide, please type it into the chat box and I will ask Victoria. For those of you a little less familiar with Zoom, you can adjust the way your screen appears. Our recommendation is to select Speaker View, which will highlight the person speaking. You will find this at the top of the Zoom screen. Before our flight takes off for Spain, I'd like to take a moment to tell you a little bit about the Jewish Federation of South Palm Beach County. As you may know, Federation takes care of our people from right down the street to across the world. Through the annual campaign, our Federation raises and allocates funds to its partner agencies to provide critical assistance to those in need, including individuals and families, seniors, people with disabilities, and the unemployed. Federation builds and sustains a vibrant Jewish community, creating avenues for Jewish education and identity while fostering close ties to Israel. Though this is not a fundraising event, we invite you to make a gift today of any size, as it will be greatly appreciated. Our Federation is participating in a matching gift challenge. Your gift today will be matched by 50% and has the opportunity to go even further to address local needs. Now more than ever, our local and global Jewish community is counting on us. Together, we will thrive through these challenging times and build a more resilient future. Make your gift today by visiting jewishboca.org/make-a-pledge. Thank you. So now, through the magic of Zoom, I'd like to welcome you to Spain and introduce Dr. Victoria Atlas, our guide for the trip. Victoria made Aliyah from Moscow before settling in Madrid, where she earned a PhD in medieval Hispanic Jewish studies. She was the scholar and guide on our women's mission to Spain last year, and we are delighted that she will now lead us on a Jewish journey through Spain.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much, Gloria, for introducing me. I want to thank the Federation team, and I want to thank Gloria for inviting me, for giving such an amazing honor and invitation for Spain to come out to you and for you to come here to us to Spain. I would also want to thank Gil Travel, Rebecca in particular, for all the time she dedicated in helping and sorting and advising. It's been of great value. And to each and every one of you for coming around, for dedicating your time to this virtual trip. Though it is a virtual trip, but on the other hand, it allows us to travel not only through space, but also through time. And that is indeed exciting. As of now, I will start sharing with you my screen. And while we are doing this trip together, every now and then I'll stop and ask. I know you have very many people, so Gloria will center all the questions, and now and then I will stop to ask Gloria if there are any questions. And in 3, 2, 1, 0, the magic begins. So it's morning there, and what I want now to share with you takes us far away back in time. it takes us to one of those years that everybody keeps in their mind. We're talking 1492. It's the year of very many events, but the major events that we're going to talk about today are those you see on the screen. On the one hand, the tragedy of the expulsion of the Jews from Spain. We're speaking about people who had been living before 1492 for over 1500 years here in Spain. So it was a real tragedy because it was actually the situation of having to get away from what many considered their real motherland. But on the same year, it's also the year that's very close to you. It's the year when Columbus discovers America. Now, the funny thing is that there are some scholars who consider Columbus to be of Jewish origin. One of the reasons they say that is because the original date for Columbus to sail out was fixed for what on Jewish calendar shows as Yom Kippur. And look how it turns around that Columbus denies this date as a possible date of sail and requests the sail to be moved to a new date. So indeed, in some fashion, the two greatest events of that year actually conjure into one, all the more so that the expulsion of Jews provided the royal crown with the necessary funds to actually start this discovery of East through West.
Yeah.
Here we go to maybe one of the most dramatic pictures that you may find nowadays in a museum. All the more so that it depicts so lively what actually had happened over 500 years ago. On this picture, what you see in the center are the couple of the royal king and queen, the Queen Isabel I of Castile and the King Fernando VI of Aragon. But what's really dramatic about it is what's depicted here. The painter is Emilio Salas, and this is a 19th century painting. Look what actually we see here. We see here two Jewish men. One of them had converted. That's the man in black whom you see pointed with the arrow. His name is Torquemada. Until nowadays, he is the proverbial demonic man because he was the first inquisitor, the man personally responsible for burning at stake of hundreds of people. He was Jewish and he decided to convert to Christianity. The man that stands with his back to us, with a keep on his head, is also a Jew, but he kept to his faith. This man is called Abraham Senior, and he was the Minister of Economy, the Secretary, the confidant of the Queen Isabel I. And the amazing thing is that both of them, they stand at this moment in this picture within this amazingly beautiful castle that you see, which is actually the castle or Alcázar of Segovia. Now, things are much closer to us than you can imagine, because what you actually see here, this very castle served Walt Disney to create his Sleeping Beauty castle. So isn't that amazing how things intertwine through history, quite despite their distance in time and space, so getting so close to us. So Abraham Senior was from Segovia, and also Isabel the Catholic, the queen that we are concerned with, grew up in this castle. It is the other castle that we're traveling to. This amazingly beautiful setting is the most beautiful palace you can see in Spain and maybe anywhere in the world. This is the Palace of Alhambra in Granada. Some of you have been there. Some of you will come and see it when borders are open again. But the reason I'm bringing this forward is not the beauty of this place, but the paradox that in this very place, in this amazingly beautiful palace, the Queen Isabel I signed the Edict of Expulsion against the Jews. What you see on the left is that very edict signed with her own letter. What you see on the right is the only one of the two remaining real portraits of this woman. Now, I know the majority of people with us here are women, and this is maybe one of the most exciting and amazing figures in the history of women that we see in front of us. On the one hand, we can't perceive her as not evil because she caused one of the greatest tragedies of all times. But on the other hand, she was a woman who had to fight for every single thing she achieved in her life. She was not supposed to rule. She was not supposed to take any decisions. And yet, what she does is she reaches the highest power. She marries a man, Ferdinand, out of love, endangering her right to rule the crown of Castile. She has 5 children. When she is pregnant with her 5th daughter, she rides the horse into the Battle of Granada. But leave that alone. That 5th daughter of her, Catherine, is the first wife of Henry VIII of England. You probably remember him. That was the man who, upon not getting the divorce from Catholic Church, as the Catholic Church does not allow a divorce, stated that he needs his own religion and founded the religion that is called the Church of England or the Anglican Church, and eventually managed to divorce, only to marry the lady-in-waiting of Catherine. Then he executed his next wife, then he married again, and so 6 women. So you see, in a way, just beyond this historical, overwhelming tragedy, we still find a real blood and flesh person, actually at some moments even appealing, as surprising as this could be. Now, I said that actually Jews were settled, were placed in front of a very dramatic situation. Jews in a period of 6 months had to decide whether they want to remain in Spain, and then they had to convert to Christianity, or they accept to leave their country after 1500 years in order to remain Jews, practicing Jews. It's a tragedy that we can only imagine. Very many people left, but a vast amount of families decided to convert, some of them sincerely, but some of them only converted in appearance. Those people who kept their faith secretly, trying to hide away and nobody to be allowed to know about it, those people were called crypto-Jews. Now, crypto-Jews were persecuted by that horribly dangerous and dark institution that everybody had once at least heard about. We're talking about Spanish Inquisition. What you see in front of you is a painting by one of the 3 most influential Spanish painters, a painting by Francisco Goya and Lucientes. Along with Dalí and Picasso, he is indeed an amazingly popular painter until nowadays worldwide. Now, what's amazing about this painting is that he painted it from first-hand experience. The man in the center that you see, sitting with his head billowed and almost doomed, that's the man judged by the Inquisition. What you see here is an auto de fe. The trial by Inquisition, it doesn't always have to be a trial of those accused of being crypto-Jews, but many times it was. Now, the frightening thing about the Inquisition was that when they wanted you to be afraid, before seizing you as a prisoner, they would send you out an invitation, almost as if it were a wedding invitation. telling you, hey there, why don't you come around and see the trial of such and such? That was an advertisement. That was actually a little reminder. Beware, you can be the next. Now, Goya was invited twice to be the guest of honor at such a trial. This is a painting from the 19th century. The first time Goya was invited because he painted a nude woman, and the other one because he showed himself supportive of the liberal movement in Spain. When he painted this painting that you're looking at right now, he was so much afraid that he had to beg for protection the ruling queen of the time, and eventually he was forced to flee Spain for France. Now, before we go on, Gloria, is there any question?
Hi, Victoria. I don't have any questions yet, so I do want to remind people, if you have any questions for Victoria throughout the presentation, you have a chat screen that you can type it in and I'll see it, and then I'll be able to ask Victoria any questions you have. Thanks.
Okay, so we move on, right?
Yes.
Okay. So what we have in front of us right now is a situation wherein people had been living on the soil of Iberian Peninsula for over 1,500, 1,500 years in a row, more than Jews had ever lived anywhere. And right now they have to make the decision of their lives when they have their future that is uncertain, or their past that is really, really glorious. So much so that, for example, what you see here is a song in stone to a love story. In the 12th century, there was a king who was called Alfonso VIII, who fell deeply in love with a Jewish girl. So much so that the man retired to a palace for 7 years, forsaking all his duties just to be with the girl. He was very much afraid that the father of the girl, who was his counselor and minister and a very powerful man in the community, would protest and hide her away from the king, even under the threat of death. So to humor the father of the beloved girl, whom the history remembers as La Fermosa Raquel, the beautiful Rachel, the king built the Jewish community of Toledo this amazing synagogue. What do you know? That is Love in Stone. It's still visitable. Nowadays, it's a museum. It's one of the only 2 synagogues standing fully in their beauty until nowadays. And that's really sad at times, because nowadays there are no Jews in Toledo. But there are these amazing reminders of the glory and of actually the convivium, the life together of Jews and Christians and Muslims, of course, with their problems and tragedies, but also with their amazing mutual relationships, sometimes of beautiful love. And then, as I tell you, there are actually 2 synagogues still standing. This is the other one. This synagogue is nowadays a museum, but it is also a very, very unique place. It was founded when Jews were already prohibited from building a single synagogue. So much so that when it was allowed to be built, nobody, even the man who asked for the permission, was expecting the permission to be granted. The synagogue you're looking at is called Sinagoga del Tránsito. That's not a Jewish name, of course, because as you can see by the 2 bells on the tower, after it used to be the synagogue, after the expulsion of Jews, it was turned into a church. However, let's see how could it happen that the synagogue was allowed to be built in the 14th century, namely 600 years before the return of the Jews to Spain, 100 years, almost 150 years before the expulsion of the Jews, and actually turns into one of the most unique places for Jews to visit in Spain. On your left, you see a sculpture representing a very influential Spanish Jew called Samuel Halevi. You can imagine he didn't look like that. This is a typical European Jewish man. Jews of Spain in the Middle Ages didn't look like that. But when they decided to put up a monument to the memory of this man, that's how they decided to present him. Samuel Halevi was a counselor, an economy minister, and an amazingly wise man who served the king Pedro I of Castile, whom you see on your right with the crown on his head. Pedro's life was miserable and his death was even worse. So there is no second Pedro in the story of Spain. He is the only Pedro we have. And in the middle, you have a typical street of Toledo. Just look how narrow it is, how inviting it is. You can traipse Toledo forever and feel as if you're in Jerusalem. Many people say that this is the Jerusalem of Sepharad. During the empowerment of Samuel Halevi, despite the civil war that was going on, despite all the difficulties, the crown got richer and the king got much richer. When there was a fire in the Jewish quarter, Samuel Halevi went to the king and said, listen, the major synagogue of our community had been burned to ashes. Please let us build a new one. And Pedro said, come on, you know you're not allowed to. My great-great-great-grandfather, Alfonso the Wise, said Jews can amend their synagogues, make them larger or make them smaller, but under no circumstances can they build a new synagogue. And Samuel Halevi said, well, I know, but you're the king. Can't you make your own decisions? And Pedro said, oh, well, you know what? You're right. Build your synagogue. So what does Samuel Halevi do? He does. He builds this synagogue. But don't think that it all was a hunky-dory, because the man was accused by one of his fellow courtsmen of taking bribes and robbing the crown's treasury. So the king, who was quite paranoid and a man of little trust, actually imprisoned Samuel Halevi and he was tortured to death. So the man lost his life, but Toledo gained this amazing synagogue that's in front of your eyes right now. This is a reproduction of how people used to settle inside, and we'll see later how it looks right now. Let me stop once again and make sure there are no questions. Gloria?
Yes, I do have some questions now. So some of them are going back to the Goya painting. Somebody wants to know what the hats are that the people are wearing. And another question related to that is somebody said that Goya lived until 1828 and the Inquisition lasted until early 1700s. So why was he into auto da fe at that time?
Okay. Any more questions?
Yes, I have a question not related to Goya. Is there a difference between crypto Jews and Marranos?
Okay.
We have Suzanne Zorn's 17th great-grandfather built the synagogue, the El Transito. So that's interesting.
Who did?
One of our participants, Suzanne Zorn. Her 17th great-grandfather built that synagogue, the El Transito.
Oh wow! I want her. I check her signature in my papers. Her autograph.
we'll connect you guys after.
Okay.
So those are pretty much the questions right now.
Okay.
The difference between crypto Jews and Marranos.
Yeah.
Related to
I
Goya.
remember all the questions.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. So let's get to the quickest thing of your questions. The Inquisition, the last inquisitory trial to have been celebrated under the accusation of a man as a crypto Jew was celebrated in 1818, 1818. Can you imagine that? That's virtually yesterday. The Inquisition was, there were 3 attempts to abolish it. However, it was only eventually abolished in 1834 by the decision of Isabel II, which is very funny because Isabel I founds it in Seville and Isabel II cancels it, abolishes it in Madrid in 1834. Now for Goya, the trials of the Inquisition were or intended to be not only menacing from the point of view of the legal action, but also humiliating. So those accused, be they men or women, would wear these hats that are called in Spanish capirote, and an amazingly frightening sort of toga or dress, you know, that was called San Benito. And on the San Benito, you would see the flames painted over and the demons running around the flames also painted on this dress, on this toga. So not only during the trial itself would the people suffer, but already their way to this room of the trial or their way to the execution, they would be spit at, and they would be humiliated and called names and whatever. Now, crypto Jews is the very same thing as marrano, also as a secret Jew, or these are the Jews who converted only for the appearance of the conversion in order to be able to stay in Spain, but they actually clung to their original faith. And the frightening thing was that, for example, if somebody saw you changing clothes on Friday night or washing your hands before your meal, they would accuse you of being a crypto Jew. So it was very complicated and very dangerous. Any more questions?
Yes. How were the men and women separated for prayer?
Okay, that's exactly where we stopped. So we're hopping back on our
thank you.
traveling time machine. So here we go into the second synagogue standing yet nowadays, which is called Sinagoga del Tránsito. We usually call it the Synagogue of Samuel Halevi. And you can see here a very interesting division. In the very center, the rabbi and or the cantor would stand. Now, where you see the arrow, that's Aron HaKodesh, the Holy Ark. That's where the Torah would be kept, or the many Torahs. And there, up on the second floor, is the female section, is where women would stand and pray, stand or sit, mostly stand. Men would settle around the bama, around this heightening downstairs. Of all that you see here, all the middle section is now destroyed because, as I told you, it was turned into a church. However, one of the things that remains standing alive and amazingly beautiful are these engravings on the walls that you can see of 2 types. The letters in white over black and the letters in white over white. What you see here are fragments from Psalms For example, the one in white down is a Psalm number 100. And of course, we must understand that we are looking at the most symbolic building and the most symbolic undertaking of the Jews from the past, because we're talking of the last synagogue to have been built, the synagogue that was built despite the express prohibition from the kings beforehand, and the synagogue that by its architecture symbolizes this convivium, this togetherness of Moorish and Jewish heritage under the Christian rule. So it is not surprising that when in 1968, Franco authorized the first synagogue to be built since 1453, that's over 600 years. The architect wanted to maintain, to underline this direct connection between past and present, between the glory of those Jews in the Middle Ages and the forthcoming new Jewish settlement nowadays. So what you see pointed by the arrow is the exact copy of that engraving that you see in Toledo. And actually what you see is the main prayer hall in the Beit Yaakov synagogue that was, as I told, built in 1968. Now that's very surprising, because though Jews were allowed to start coming back already by the last quarter of the 19th century, and in 1917 the first synagogue was opened, but in somebody's private apartment, how come that during the dictatorship of Franco's, this synagogue was allowed to be built from the cornerstone? And some people say that it may be due to the fact that just recently the 6 Days War was won, a war that made the whole size and legacy of the war to become something completely new and unique. Since the times of King David, we never won a battle like that. So maybe that was one of the reasons why Franco allowed to, fulfill, to close this loop, these 600 years of absence, giving the permission to inaugurate a new building built from the scratch in Madrid. And what you see here is this amazingly touching moment when the president of the community and the main people of the community come around to put the cornerstone. Now, you know what? This cornerstone, following the Sephardi tradition of the Middle Ages, was brought from Jerusalem. So they physically put a little bit of Jerusalem into the foundation of the renewed Jewish life of Spain. And what you then see, this is this stone, and what you then see is this amazing moment of Hachnasat Torah. That is to say, this is a moment of the first dedication of the Torah scrolls. Now, we have some 14 Torah scrolls in this community because many people feel it is their honor and duty to bring back to this community some of the most ancient Torah scrolls available. And one of them was brought from China. Go figure. Now, as I told you, the first Jews to have started coming back to Spain would start coming in the last quarter of the 19th century. It is very interesting that during the World War II, Franco supposedly declared himself as a supporter of Hitler's, but a neutral supporter. I mean, he sent this blue division to the Russian front and then said, I don't play, that's it. Don't ask for anything from me anymore. The funny thing is that because of this ambiguous yet very secure position of Spain, Hitler sent many politicians and political figures to Spain to negotiate his deals and his interests and so on. One of those men was a man whose tomb you see here. His name was Terch, and he knew 50 languages. And for that reason, he was sent as a diplomat to Albania. But that's not the funny thing. The funny thing is that he was Jew. And not only was he a Jewish man, but also he kept being in favor of Hitler's government and Hitler's proximate circle during the war. On one of the occasions, he came for such negotiations, as I mentioned before, to Madrid. When he went back to Germany, he was seized and imprisoned. But he wasn't seized because he was Jewish. He was seized and imprisoned because he was married to a woman whose cousin formed part of the Valkyria operation, that is, of an attempt of murder of Hitler's. So this man, who formed part of Hitler's government and part of Hitler's politics, being Jewish, finds himself imprisoned in a concentration camp. When the Nuremberg trials begin, they call him to testify both as a victim and as part of the evil forces of Germany. And thanks to all those amazing insights that he gives the American lawyers and the judges and the historians, he is eventually let free and he flees to Spain, and he gets buried at the first cemetery that admitted Jews, the British Cemetery of Madrid. His son is now one of the most influential reporters and a great supporter of Israel, and we're speaking, of course, still of a Jewish family. Now, we are getting to our day-to-day because, of course, it's not only a trip into our past and not even a trip into our very recent yesterday, but also into our nowadays. The people that you see here and are actually two religious leaders. One of them is Rabbi Ben-Dahan, who is a rabbi of the Orthodox community, the community that occupies this historical synagogue built in 1968. But the man that you see by his side is Gabriel Nadaf. Some call him the Zionist priest or the Zionist Arab priest. He's Arab. He is Christian. And he dedicates a lot of work to trying to bring together Jews and Arabs in Israel. When there were terrorist attacks against Christians in Iraq, the Jewish community organized this amazing event of support to Christians in the Middle East and invited Gabriel Nadaf and many other churchmen, both from Spain and other places, to express our solidarity and support and help to the Christian communities worldwide. And I don't want to finish our meeting before talking with you about my own community. What you see here is a very exciting and almost overwhelming moment, because it's a small community, of our reformist community of Madrid. When we got our baby Torah, you see it's a very, very tiny Torah. That's why we call it baby Torah. We got it from a reformist community in England. And this is the first time we can actually do proper Torah reading with the proper Torah scroll that was donated to us. On the left, you see Yael Kobano, who is the president of our community. And it is a time when we most need each other. So every Friday night, we keep our online Shabbat meeting and activities for kids. And we light candles live and online. And well, I hope that by the time my son has to do his bar mitzvah, we're allowed to move around and meet and hug and give kisses one to another, and we'll be able to actually do all that when he's 13. We still have some time on our hands. So just to resume, just to review what we have done so far, we have actually traveled over more than 2,000 years in just a little span of time, seeing that Jews started off in Spain as one of the most glorious contributors to Spanish culture. For over 1,500 years, Jews were part and parcel of economy, medicine, science, literature, any style and field of life you can think of. For reasons we cannot go into, in 1492, Jews were forced to leave Spain. Many remained, pretendedly or sincerely converting to Christianity. But because there was this menacing institute of Inquisition, Jews could not come back until the second half of the 19th century. Eventually, this return brought to life this now thriving community of Jews throughout Spain. There are some 40,000 Jews altogether in Spain. We're a very tiny community, some 12,000 to 15 that live in Madrid, roughly 10,000 in Barcelona, and the rest spread through more or less major cities such as Seville and Malaga, and some places in Galicia. I don't mean Poland, I mean Spanish Galicia. And that's that. However, it's a very active population. We have many communities. In Madrid alone, there are 8 communities. Some of them are Orthodox, Spanish Orthodox. Some are reformists, some are conservatives. Same goes for Barcelona, and the reformist community in Madrid and in Barcelona work a lot together and create many projects together. So that is that so far. And I'm willing to answer any other questions that you may have.
Hi, Victoria. This is so interesting. We do have some questions, and maybe you could just reflect. Somebody asked if they were mainly Sephardic Jews. I think that was referring to when you were speaking about the people that that were expelled. So if you could just, tell us, like, where did most of those people go to? Or even do you have an idea of how many people we're talking about that stayed Jewish and left Spain? And then when Jews started returning in the late 1800s, were these like the same people, basically the ancestors of those who had been expelled, or were they people coming from other places?
Should I answer that and then we move on to another question?
Sure.
Okay. So we don't have exact numbers. Okay. But if we think, for example, of the fact that in the 13th century, there were 13 synagogues in Toledo. 13 synagogues. That's an overwhelming number.
Toledo, they were not in Madrid. Madrid wasn't a city then, right?
Well, Madrid was a very little relevant place. Actually, Madrid doesn't start being relevant until after the expulsion.
Okay.
So some historians claim there was a Juderia. Juderia means a Jewish borough. I tend to think that there either was not, or it was a really, really minor one, or maybe it starts getting really formally present somewhere late in the 14th century, that is some 60 years before the expulsion. Because we must remember that Jews would usually settle close to the king, because the king was literally and legally the owner of every Jew. Go figure. I'm not joking. The kings could kill, kidnap, sell, or give as a gift any one of their Jews. Therefore, we know of occasions where Jews would be very highly situated, very, very prestigious Jews, would be actually kidnapped by the king, and the economy of the kingdom, or at least of the king, would be restored by the ransom that the community would pay for restoring its rabbi or whoever it is. So even so, Jews would settle near the king. The kings didn't have a fixed capital. So usually Jews would settle where the kings used to go. Very little people know that the kings would not go to Madrid until late 14th and really beginning of the 15th century. So we don't know how many Jews, if at all, and if yes, where exactly would they be in Madrid in those times. So we can actually say that a fixed community, an established community, and a community that you can pinpoint is something that starts in the 20th century in Madrid. However, the last Jews to have built the synagogue in Spain were, as I told you, the Jews in Toledo in 1453. Now, when we speak of those who left, as there are no precise numbers, we depend very much on who takes the stand on the issue. We are running somewhere between 60 and 100,000 of Jews claimed to have lived then in Spain. Accordingly, we estimate that some 40% left and the rest remained. So much so that after the end of the 15th century, there is actually a new class, a new social layer called conversos, the converted ones, the new Christians. And they're bullied and trampled upon and persecuted and many times set aside because they are too educated, they are too well formed, they are too bright, and they still present a menace to other people because of their brilliant brains. But now they cannot pull them aside saying you're not Christians. So there are other attempts to
Victoria, excuse me, can you stop sharing your screen so we can see you?
Sure, absolutely. Great idea. How about now?
Best. Thank you.
Sure. Now, so we think that some, let's say just approximate numbers, if they were 100,000, then 40,000 would leave, 60,000 would remain. When Jews start coming back, they start coming back in the second, even in the last quarter of the 20th century, but they have nothing to do with those that left. Those that left went to three major destinations. North of Africa, that is Egypt, Algeria, and Morocco. Ottoman Empire, which is nowadays ex-Yugoslavia, Bulgaria, part of Hungary, Turkey, and Greece. And of course, very, very little number, but still an important group, went to the Netherlands. And that's one of the major reasons why the best book business was developed in Netherlands, because Jews needed to print Torahs and then Shulchan Aruch, and then all those prayers and testimonies and schooling and everything. And of course, you cannot do that if you don't have books when you already have the printing system. So that became one of the major centers of Jewish scholarship. And of course, Baruch Spinoza, who is one of the greatest philosophers of all times, is the Sephardi Jew who went to Netherlands. Well, his grandfather went. As for those who come back, the first Jews to come back are all European Jews coming from France and even from Austro-Hungarian Empire. Actually, one of the first men to have been invited to come to Spain by the royal family was the uncle of Franz Kafka. He was invited to come and oversee the development of the railway system. The funny thing is that there are, allegedly at least, I haven't seen it in person, letters between the uncle and the nephew, the uncle saying, well, kids, for whatever you are doing there, come over and do it here. I mean, you can do it from Madrid. And I always think that if Franz Kafka did come to Spain, we would see optimistic and maybe even comical Franz Kafka. But he never left Czechia, he never left Austro-Hungarian Empire. So we only have the tragic Kafka. And only in the very beginning of the 20th century do the Sephardi Jews, those that fled Spain, their descendants start coming back to Spain. Nowadays, it's a mixed community. We have people from Sephardi tradition, that is the descendants of the expelled Jews. We have people of the European tradition. We have some people who come from the Latin American countries and some who come from Israel.
That's great. We're going to ask one more kind of broad question and then we'll wrap it up. I think the question is, are regular Spanish people, you know, people say that, I don't know, 20% of Spaniards have Jewish blood in them. I don't know if that's true. You could probably tell us that. But are people looking into their backgrounds with DNA testing or showing an interest in Judaism in general in Spain?
Well, you know, I didn't want to make this story too long, so I kept out a bit of information that I'm willing to contribute now due to this question, and that I think can be of great interest to everybody because it actually illustrates the situation. Until the beginning of the 20th century, Spain virtually forgot its Jewish past. It seemed as if 1500 years disappeared into a non-being just overnight. But in 1904, a senator called Ángel Pulido went to Vienna to visit his son. He was a great doctor. He was actually a correspondent with Sigmund Freud. And when he goes to Vienna, he meets there a couple who speak a very weird Spanish. Imagine somebody talking Shakespearean English over your ear. That's exactly what he experienced. And he turned around and said, like, excuse me asking, what part of Spain are you from? And they said, we've never been to Spain. He said, oh, well, your parents. And they said, our parents never went to Spain. Well, your grandparents. No, it's our great grandparents that were expelled from Spain in 1492. And the senator said, come on, this was 400 years ago. And they said, yes, but it was our motherland. And actually, wow, the piece of music that you were listening to as you were joining us is one of the amazing lyrical pieces inherited from medieval Spain. And when the senators saw that 400 years away from their land, these people kept their language and proverbs and even dishes and food, he was so overwhelmed that when he came back to Spain, he dedicated his life to awakening the people of Spain, from the Senate to the poorest ones, to their Jewish past. So nowadays, the majority of Spaniards, in my experience, I haven't done a poll, right? It's my private experience and the one that I experience from people around me, feel awfully proud of their Jewish past. Because of course, we still go on as the brightest people in the world. So they say, yeah, we are of Jewish origin. And my great grandmother used to lit, 2 candles on Friday night, but I don't know why she would do that. Or so you know that it's true. And some people do genetic tests. And many feel so proud that they keep some Jewish objects, even though they don't know what to do with it or where it comes from. But funnily enough, they separated totally from their nowadays Jewish life. They can be immensely proud and say, I know my great somebody was Jewish, but I don't like Israel. And you say, like, that sounds schizophrenic, you know, and no, it's not the same. You say, okay. So yes, there is a great affinity with the historical Jewish roots of Spain, but it doesn't necessarily help us to bring the people to support Israel, for example.
Okay. Well, that was a great story to wrap up the program today. I really appreciate you sharing that with us. Thank you so much, Victoria.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your insight and expertise, and thank you all for joining us this morning. We hope you've enjoyed this journey to Spain, and we look forward to you joining us on our next trip. This time we're going to Budapest on December 15th. More information will follow. Have a great day.
Have a great day.